Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today likely needs no introduction for many of you. His name is Job van der Voort. He is the CEO and co-founder at Remote.com, which is one of the leading remote-first companies in the world. They also service other companies who want to hire internationally and hire remote workers around the world. So they are very much so entangled in the whole global mobility and remote work space. And Job is one of the leading voices in that world. So we get into all of the above in this conversation, as well as learn a little bit about a new product and service that they're offering, which is designed to help people find remote work, true remote work, so that they can work from anywhere in the world. We also talk a little bit about Job's personal story, living in Portugal and now the Netherlands, and how he's able to build a company from, in his words, the middle of nowhere in Holland. Really fun. I loved getting to know Job a little bit better. I've been following his work for a long time and had never had the chance to really sit down and chat with him. So this was a lot of fun for me, and I hope it will be for you all as well. Please help me in welcoming Job to About Abroad. You know, something that's really interesting, we have this interview scheduled today on a Monday, and I just returned from our Doist leadership retreat last week. We went to this place called like the Workation Village in northern Italy. I don't know if you've heard of it,
No,
but it was awesome. I think it's a really good spot for team offsites and stuff. I mean, they basically have just converted an old Italian village into a sweet place for, you know, holding meetings and getting out of your stuffy, you know, airport hotels and stuff. But your guys came up several times, like throughout the meeting, referencing certain things that you guys are doing. And so I thought it was funny as I was preparing for the interview today. I was like, man, I've been talking about remote a lot lately, and I get to interview Job today. So that's awesome. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Chase. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. One of the things that came up, we were talking about like just some, you know, different ways that we can enhance the remote experience. You guys are a fully distributed team. So is Doist. We have no offices. I believe you guys, same for you, right? No offices?
No offices. No.
Yeah.
Never had, never will.
Yeah. Samesies. So one of the things that came up was like, yeah, remote does this. They got everybody like, was it Oculus or VR?
Yeah. So I think one of the hardest things to do in a remote team is to get a sense of presence, right? And I think there's extremely hard limits on the amount of presence you can feel with Zoom. And so I wanted to experiment with like how can we get closer, and so I figured, well, what if we just give everybody a VR headset and then organize VR parties? So we did a number of Christmas parties in VR. And you know, that was pretty cool, I think. And it certainly does give you another. So the theory was, the hypothesis was, if everybody is in VR together, you get a greater sense of presence. And if you get a greater sense of presence, that, you know, you build connections in a different way with people, which is good if you can't meet up in person. And I don't explicitly want to meet up with everybody in the same place at the same time, because it's a lot of people in a lot of different locations. So we send everybody, when they're joining, a Meta Quest 2 nowadays, or I don't know if we still do it, actually. I don't know if it's still in the budget. It's not a very big expense for a company like ours, but what we did find is that beyond the occasional party, if it's not actively part of how you run your business, it doesn't actually get used as much. And so, yeah, we did that. I don't know if we still do it, to be honest. I don't know if it's still included in the budget, but I don't think so. And there's definitely not really a great way yet to do this at scale with a lot of people. So, for example, what we would do is we'd use Rec Room, which I would recommend very much. You get custom rooms in there, and there we would hold the Christmas party We had Beat Saber tournaments, these kind of things. And there's still a number of people at remote that still regularly do this, but you can't really get work done in it yet. I think eventually you'll be able to. Uh, but yeah, it was pretty cool, and it was a pretty good way to see each other, get a sense of each other, especially around the times where COVID was still like a genuine worry, whereas like many people wouldn't want to get together, and getting together was like a real ordeal. So yeah, it was fun, and I would recommend it to people that are curious about it. But we also find that for many people it's just a hassle. It's already a hassle to get on Zoom, right, and get on Slack, and then to be like, oh, now you have to get a VR headset. You need a Meta account, and then with your Meta account, you need to create a Rec Room account, and then in the Rec Room, you have to put certain code, and then you are in a room, and then you see colleagues there that you can only recognize them by voice. You can't even, normally you click on their name, the time. So yeah, what seemed to be something very amazing is still really rough for very serious usages, like what we try to do at remote at scale.
Yeah, there's a lot of friction there. Like as you actually go through all the steps, it's like, is this worth it? And now we're jumping through all these hoops to like recreate the thing that we were kind of trying to get away from in the physical sense. And it's like, is this a good use of our time? But it seems cool. And if nothing else, people from the outside are like, wow, remote school. They invest in the experience. I mean, I personally just think that's part of the deal, right? Like the companies that are succeeding in doing this whole remote thing well are experimenting and investing in making the experience a positive one. And, unfortunately, I mean, I think we know like a lot of people just didn't get that experience over the last few years. And we're just kind of thrown into the weed whacker of of remote done not so great. So I just think it's cool. Like there's a lot of companies out there innovating, and you guys are definitely one of those.
I mean, we're doing our best. I think the way to think about it is that you have to treat your company as a product. You have to evolve it, especially as it grows, as the needs change, as you learn different things. And for us, one of those learnings was, well, VR works a little bit, but it doesn't work at scale, and it doesn't work for work. It works a little bit for connection for people that are really into it. But in all other ways, yeah, again, I think a company will succeed as a remote company or even an office-based company in terms of culture if it spends meaningful effort and is deliberate about it, right? That's ultimately it. Are you deliberate about the kind of company you want to create? And I think the majority of companies, let's say normal companies, they don't actually spend any time on it. They rent an office and then they work, right? And then what is the office culture? It's about Friday we have drinks. And I think among venture-backed companies and startups and tech companies, it's a little bit more common to think a little bit about the kind of company that you want. And I think the fact that you're thinking about it and the fact that you're evaluating your culture and you're thinking, well, can we do something better? Can we make a change? Already sets you apart from everybody else and probably makes you better for it. I'm not sure if that's always the case, but probably makes you better for it. And that makes those kind of companies more attractive to work at, because I regularly visit customers of ours that they do nothing, right? What their expectation of an office is, you go to the office and on Friday there's their drink, and that's it. That's the company culture, and many times they're very happy with it, even though you can make meaningful improvements to that.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to people all the time who will lean on like the water cooler chat and like, oh, you have to be in the same room to do brainstorming and be creative, or you have to, how are you going to get those serendipitous conversations where all the sparks fly? And I think back to like, have you been in those places? Like, do the sparks fly at the water cooler? Like, if they do, like, you have a very, you got a unicorn situation going on there, because most of the time that's not the case in my experience.
I agree with that. Although I have to admit, I've worked for 9 months in an office. Before that, I worked in labs, and the rest of the time that I've been working, I've been working from remotely. So my remote work experience far outshines that of working in an office, and I was not working in the most exciting office in the planet. So I don't know, maybe those places exist, and I've just missed them.
I'm sure they do. I mean, the thing is like it's all about flexibility and providing options. And I have friends that they love the office. They hate working remotely. They don't want to. They don't want to spend a lot of time in virtual calls or the metaverse or whatever. They want to like go and meet people in person, and they really enjoy that, and that's cool. What I think is very exciting about the phase that we're in now is that like optionality is more table stakes. It's more of it's a baseline, And before, it seemed like this thing, like at least for me, like just from my standpoint, it felt like something I had to make career sacrifices for, or lifestyle sacrifices for, if I wanted to obtain the level of flexibility, location independence and such. That doesn't feel to be the case as much anymore, which is for me is like the exciting part.
I think so. We do know that the demand for remote work is far greater than the supply of it. Like many factors greater. And so for most people, maybe it's not a career sacrifice. It's more of, well, I don't really have a choice because there's, one remote job to every 100 office-based jobs. And for that one job, and we see this ourselves, there's thousands of applicants. Right, at remote, we get more than 10,000 applications a month to work at our company. Which is, we're hiring a lot of people, but we're not hiring 10,000 a month. And so, and it's just working for our company, not for our customers. And so, yeah, it's still early. It's still early, and I think the optionality is very limited for a lot of people. And of course, the work we do, we hope to change a little bit in that sense, but still have a long way to go.
Yeah, we keep referencing remote in your company, and I'm going to go out on a limb and suspect that most people listening to this podcast know what you guys do. But for anybody that is not quite sure, maybe we should give them a little bit of a background. I could do it, but I think while we've got the CEO here, we might as well get his take on on what the company does.
So, Remote started out as a company that makes it possible to hire people in another country. So if you want to hire Jane and she lives in Germany, but you have a US-based company, we could facilitate that. And nowadays we provide the entire tool suite for HR companies. And so that means anything you need to run an international company, all the HR stuff. Sometimes I say all the boring stuff, even though, I don't think it's boring, but to many people it is for good reason. That is what we provide. So paying people anywhere, managing and I think the exciting thing is, and because you told me when we were launching this, what we just launched, although in the present time that we're recording this, not yet, is also a place to find remote jobs. And so that is, I think, very exciting. So what we want to do is we want to, one, create or increase the number of remote jobs on the planet. And so we do that by helping it make it very easy for employers to hire people anywhere. And now what we are also starting to do is actually help you as an individual find more of those, still too few, but those remote jobs. And in particular, what we want to do is make really clear to you, can you actually do this job, right? Many remote jobs, for example, are limited to, you can do this remotely, but only if you're in the US, right? You can do this remotely, but 3 days a week, and then you have to go 2 days to the office. And so what we spent a lot of time doing is creating a way to easily show that to you, so you can actually find work through us, and then get paid very easily, whether you're a freelancer or you want to be hired directly by an employer.
That is super exciting that you guys are launching that aspect, because so this is the kind of like elementary question that I think a lot of people would ask. I've heard this question many times. They talk about the EOR space, like the employer of record space, is still very new to a lot of people. Like you talk to the average person who hasn't worked in the world that we have, like they don't really know what this means. They don't even recognize that there's like a pain point to be solved often. That like, why can't I just hire this person in Turkey? Like there are plenty of reasons why that might not work. So the fact that you guys are offering that, awesome, you leader in the space, like that's amazing. What I've had a lot of people ask me is like, can they serve me as an individual, like looking for a job, or I'm a freelancer, like I want to get hired, I'm seeking remote work. There's 10,000 of those people coming to you every month that are looking for jobs and they want to work remotely. But traditionally, this is where the question comes in. Traditionally, the EOR space has really been designed to facilitate or to serve the needs of the companies, right? Not individuals. Would you say that's accurate?
No, absolutely. Employer of record, it sounds really boring, and it is, right? It's a complicated thing. It's a complicated solution for a complicated problem. And that problem is, if you want to hire somebody as an employee in another market, in another country or territory, you essentially need to set up a local entity and figure out local labor laws, right? And so, yeah, that's a problem entirely on the employer. How do I hire somebody? It is, if that problem is solved, and we believe we solved it with remote, then it becomes much easier to hire people abroad. But indeed, it is completely a problem that employers face, right? As an individual, you just want to get a cool job. And so, yeah, we do try to now facilitate both sides of that, and we'll do more in this direction. We have other exciting plans, but I think this is a pretty big step.
Ooh, do you want to share?
No.
Or will marketing get mad?
No, I think the thing is that we now have both sides, right? I think we have the supply of people, we have the demand, which is the employers, right? And we facilitate on bringing those two together. I think the next steps are the obvious ones, right? The making it easier to hire people, making it easier to pay people. That's something that we have been doing for a long time, and we're just increasing, and we'll just keep making that easier and keep finding ways to bring those two together more and more. I think that is the most important thing. But yeah, to me, all of this is just exactly about what you said. Optionality, not just in giving actual optionality, like making it actually possible for you, independent of where you are, to make that choice. And I still think that is very difficult, and I think we still have a really long way to go. I remember when we started remote, I was like, I gave the same pitch, which is, well, we want to solve this problem. And why do we want to solve this problem of hire internationally? Because I believe great people are everywhere, great talent is everywhere. And the way that we go about it is, we do this, way we built this EOR in a very specific way. And at remote, it meant we own everything, and it gives us a lot of efficiency. And we enter the market by pricing really competitively. And I would always say, well, if it's up to me, eventually it will be free, so that there's no excuse anymore, right? As an employer, there's no additional cost to hiring somebody internationally. So it's not like, well, I have Jane, and she lives in a different country, so I have to pay a remote fee on top of her salary. And I have John, who lives close to my office, and so I only have to pay salary and not remote fee as well. And so eventually I want to get rid of that fee altogether and just make it free to hire Jane wherever she is, and like really, really make that, international hiring just as affordable and easy. Now, we're not close to that, unfortunately, yet. We can't make it free yet. There's still, costs involved. Like, there's people working at my company that want to get their salary paid. But yeah, I mean, eventually, I think that would be pretty cool to get to a place where it's actually free, where we can, help companies expand internationally, or rather remove the choice to do that and just say, well, if you're going to hire somebody, it doesn't matter where they are. It's going to, aside from how much you're going to pay them directly, it's not going to cost you any more or less. Like, it's just going to cost you one headcount, and not one headcount plus fees and other things to worry about.
I look forward to that future. I agree. We're still, as a society, and as like the remote space ecosystem, however we want to phrase it, like we still have a ways to go. Probably what I see is like the biggest blocker is just there is still this stagnant mindset amongst a lot of leaders out there who feel that you can't really do this at scale. Like, oh, it's cute, you can do this remote thing if you're a little 10-person startup or something, but eventually you're going to hit to scale and you're going to need to bring everybody together. There was a time when I thought Doist, at 100 people, like we're a pretty big group doing this at a fully remote thing, and we've been doing it for a while. But you guys flew right past that. I don't know the actual head count now, but at one point I believe you had like 1,000 people. And where are you guys now as far as that goes?
Yeah, we're like 1,200 and growing. But it's very easy to compare to an office, because the moment you're 1,200 people in the office, not like you're communicating all day with all 1,200 of them, right? So I think it's sort of a solved problem once you get to beyond 100 people, right? Up to 100 people, you're like, oh, we're one team. Let's try to maintain like the fact that we can all communicate with each other and all be on top of everything and know everybody. But even if you're fully all in an office base, you're not going to make attempts to know all 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people. They will be on other floors and other teams. You're not even want to know what they are working on, because it's too much and too big, right? And the same goes for a remote organization. And so suddenly you find yourself in a place where you don't actually have additional problems to solve anymore as a remote company, because the problems are not problems. You don't need to be in touch with everybody. So it's not like you encounter entirely new problems. The one exception to that, I would say, is getting together and having like an event. And like large office-based companies, they also do or don't do big get-togethers, right? Some of them do, and they fly everybody, like Salesforce, fly everybody to one location at insane expense, and like I don't know what benefit. I always doubted that. And others, they don't. Like most companies don't do this, right? That thousands of people all over the world, like of course they're not going to bring people together. They might do something in their office, and that's it. But so you don't really like, it doesn't get harder at scale. I think everything gets harder at scale in some way, right? It's organizationally, but not specifically for remote companies or highly distributed companies. I think the problems just stay the same, and some problems get easier. For example, once you get to our scale, and if you truly hired all over the world, it becomes much easier to have teams that are in a particular time zone, right? When you're small, when you're 100 people, you probably have a certain bias towards hiring people in a certain location. So there's going to be one, two, or a small group of people that feel isolated because they are awake when nobody else is awake, and vice versa. And that stops being true at a certain scale because you've hired enough people so that even your team in Australia feels like, well, there's this, there's things that are happening while I'm awake. And it's not like things happen and then I start working. And then, when my day ends, people start waking up and so that's sort of a problem that solves itself with sufficient scale and actually being fully distributed. But that's it really. And like, you don't really have to change your policies. Like going from 500 to 1,000 in a remote company is, it's the same as going in an office-based company, I would guess. I don't know. I've never done that.
Yeah, you come from the school of hard knocks in terms of the remote world. I mean, you were at GitLab prior to this, and then did you have a stop previous to that?
Yeah, but it was not remote. I worked in an office for a few months. I met Sid, the CEO of GitLab, and while we were both working as programmers in an office, so we very much were not working remotely. Actually, I would travel an hour and a half by train every day to that office, which for what it's worth was a nice job, and I enjoyed it, and I didn't even mind being in the office, but it wasn't the most efficient way of spending my time. And I remember every day doing my work from the train on my laptop, arriving to work, doing the same work, and then going home at the end of the day. And I would make long days doing the same thing. So yeah, it was not a very efficient thing to do. And before that, I was in science. So it was, there was no remote work there. It was all in the
lab. You've come a long way from the lab. I mean, so was that if you were going to define maybe it sounds kind of corny, like your remote work why, like, was there a desire to get into, like, to go and help build GitLab in a remote first way because of that experience? Or was it sort of just like, that just happened? And then I guess subsequently with remote as well.
No, it totally just happened. So not at all. I enjoyed my work in science, and I enjoyed working in the office at the time for that programming job. And at the time, I was, still young, but I was very free. I had a wife who also loved to work, and so there was no problem with getting in the office, and that was not the goal. My goal was to work for a startup and to work in tech, and so that programming job did that, and GitLab certainly did that. And GitLab happened to be remote, and our entire attitude at GitLab was, well, we're going to do this as long as it worked. And it just never stopped working, the working remotely and distributed. And so we fell into that, and falling into that sort of gave us or at least gave me the impression of, hey, this doesn't just work. It works incredibly well, and it works much better than in office. In part because we're forced to think about the way that we work. And then largely because we get to work with all these amazing people from all over the world, and those people get a lot of flexibility and freedom that they previously didn't have access to, and that gives you all these other additional benefits. And now I have 2 kids, and I'm like reaping all the benefits of remote work, right? And it's amazing. But if I didn't have kids, and I might as well be working from an office, and it would be fine for me. So I'm not fundamentally against office. I can totally get it, and I would be happy to work for an office if it's close to my house, etc. But I don't live close to. I live in the middle of nowhere right now, and I have 2 small kids, and every minute of my day I want to use it well. Because I like, if I don't use it well, whatever I decide to do with that time, it will really quickly feel like a waste, and commuting would certainly feel like a waste to me right now. And maybe it'll change when my kids get older and independent, but for now I gotta feed them and bathe them and put them to bed And so those are precious minutes that cost me a lot of time that I'm very happy to do, but I can also be commuting and also be working long hours while also doing those things. And I rather do that myself. I'm very proud of my professional achievements, but far prouder of my achievements as a parent.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that's like, fortunately, less, it's less overlooked than it was during the height of this kind of like office versus remote conversation and like, immediately following the pandemic and everything. But I think amongst the naysayers, there's a mentality that this is sort of like a young person's selfish, like want to be digital nomad or want to like travel and take your laptop and have, just like kind of not take work or life seriously. And I think there's a underlying tone that it's a selfish thing. The reality that I've seen is like I've watched remote work change people's lives as parents, like the use case that your example right there. People's relationships, like being able to move from one country to the other because your significant other lives in another place and you can take your career with you. Being close to aging parents, like on a societal level, injecting billions of dollars, euros, whatever, into emerging markets, providing people with opportunities that are maybe unable to go to an office physically, or they live too far to be able to commute, or they're perhaps impoverished and they don't have the means to do so, but they have the skills. You kind of alluded to this earlier, like, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunities are not. And so I see it like from the totally other side of the spectrum where I'm like, this isn't a selfish thing. This is actually like a net benefit to people that want to have an impact on their families' lives or society or whatever. And so I think I hope there's more conversation about that, because it's not just about office or remote and does this work or does it not, and return to office mandates. And it's that's just a small piece to the puzzle, but that's what gets a lot of headlines right now, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'm not too concerned about it, right? To me, it's like fundamental forces drive these things, and the fundamental force is like demand for talent. Talent is always in short supply in the direct vicinity of an office, and so remote work and international hiring, right? Which is really, I think, the important part here, whether they work remotely or from an office. I think that will continue to drive itself, right? I think what is important is that we make sure that people get the education that they want. They get the equipment that they need to do their work, right? They get the facilities that employers are actually open to working with people in different time zones, for example, and more excited and aggressive about hiring further away from their. I think those are important things, because I think the other ones, like the fundamental forces, are there. We can have, and we should totally have a conversation about it, but yeah, it's also not really relevant, because like no large employer is going to make decisions based on, let's be honest, about net benefit to society in small communities. Like, they're going to do it because of economic reasons, and because of economic reasons, this will still continue to grow. International hiring and working remotely. Just I have figures of large, well-known tech companies and their cost per head for the cost of an office, right? And then they're just immense. Like,
Yeah, it's wild.
they dwarf the cost that it costs to like work with remote, right? So they know it's super expensive to have offices, and that is not even including all the overhead that it creates. So yeah, I'm really not concerned about it. I think it will continue to increase. What I hope is that the tools and the way that we connect with each other get better, so that and that we spend less time on Zoom meetings and more time doing actual work and finding other ways to connect with each other. Maybe more time in VR or AR eventually. I think in a few years. I think those are important things. Above all, yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you, and I think I'm curious to hear if you're seeing the same as like a CEO in this space. Like, it behooves remote if those things continue to improve. So like, are the stats that you're seeing and the data that you get access to, like, does it reflect that these headlines that read like the end of remote work is coming and things like that is actually maybe a bit off base, to say the least?
I have a really biased worldview, because my view is largely indicated by companies that continue or increasingly hire internationally. Yeah, but again, yes, I see the opposite, right? I see the opposite. I see that there's more hiring internationally, right? Again, I don't know if people are working from an office or not, but I do know that they are getting hired more away from where the headquarters of said company is. So yeah, from my view, it only gets bigger. Of course, it is important news when like large tech companies move back into the office, because like a lot of employers are followers and they see that and they think that is an important move. But yeah, again, I think that because the fundamental forces don't change, at least as far as we can see, remote work continues to increase, or at least international hiring does.
It's something funny talking about like specifically about international hiring. So I just arrived to Italy about a week and a half ago, and I went to a little like local uh, English speakers meetup kind of thing, just like social outing, and sitting next to this lady, having a conversation with her, and what do you small talk? What do you do? I work at this. I work in tech, HR kind of stuff. You don't know, people don't know the details, so you kind of stay vague. Anyway, come to find out, she works at Remote, and she's on your finance team. And I said, I'm getting ready to talk to Job in a couple of days. So anyway, it's
That's a
really
good
cool
one.
because
She hasn't said that. She
I
should have
know
told me.
it was wild. It was wild. I mean, we're in this small town. Like, it's not like we're in Milan or Rome or something, but she's from a third country. I'm from a third country. Like, neither of us are from Italy. We're both working for companies, based elsewhere. We're both here in this beautiful place, thoroughly enjoying ourselves and getting to connect. And it's just like, our lives feel really full. And when we were reflecting on that, so it's cool. I do hope that this continues to rise. And I love the international hiring aspect. So very good stuff. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at Lexity. I've lived abroad in various countries, and one common denominator I've found is that dealing with foreign bureaucracy is a nightmare. Trying to navigate visa and immigration waters in another language is not something I'd recommend ever trying on your own, even for the most experienced of us. So when I recently had to renew my Spanish visa again, I turned it over to the pros at Lexity. They've already helped more than 5,000 expats and digital nomads find a home and thrive in countries like Portugal, or in my case, Spain, also Italy, France, and Greece. Some very desirable locations indeed. So whether you're trying to obtain your first visa abroad, purchase a property, or work through international tax issues, Lexity's team of friendly lawyers is here to simplify your journey. The team is super knowledgeable, bilingual, and thorough, and I seriously cannot recommend their services enough. My experience working with them has been incredible, and I can honestly say I don't know that I would have EU permanent residency if it wasn't for the help of the team at Lexity. So if you're ready to make your move abroad, then Lexity is offering an exclusive discount to About Abroad listeners. Grab 10% off your first service with the code AboutAbroad2023 and learn more over at Lexity.com in the show notes and start your abroad journey today. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. I wanted to circle back to the job board that you guys are doing, because we've talked a decent amount about the kind of like B2B space, I guess you might say. And what I'm really excited about what you guys have just launched, at least as of the day of this going live. So this is also like what I get a lot of questions about. I mean, multiple emails per day, probably. Hey, where can I go to find a good remote job? And it's cool to be able to send them to the job page.
Remote.com/jobs.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's now we have an answer. So tell me more about what you guys are building here.
Okay, so this is step one on a multi-step thing that we're working on, right? So we want to make it very easy for individuals to find jobs and for companies to find great individuals. And so this is step one, and it's still simple, but what we identified was that if you are an individual in any country in the planet looking for any job in the planet, you go to a remote working job site and you want a remote job, right? That is explicitly your intent. it's still very hard to understand if you can actually do that job. You have to go, you have to click in, you have to figure out, do they hire me based on where I am and who I am? And then if they're willing to hire me, how does it look? What is the work like? For example, do I have to go into the HQ once in a while? Do I have to travel a lot? Do I need a certain work permit? And then again, for the employer, the same questions arise, right? How much is it going to cost me to hire somebody in France versus hiring somebody in Germany? Right now, we at Remote, we have all this information, and so what we decided to do is we're going to make that incredibly obvious to you. So step one is we're launching this job board. It's a job board. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, right? But what every job has is it has clear indication about, like, well, where are you actually hiring people? Is it in a particular region? Is it truly anywhere? Is it a certain time zone? Do you need to travel a lot for your work? Do you have, I don't know, a 4-day work week or something? Like, these are very simple things. And so what we do is we show that. We don't show it when you click into the job. You see it in the list, right? And so if you see the list of jobs, you see immediately highlighted, can I actually work from anywhere? And then as an individual, if you live not in the US, you can just filter, oh, I can, I am, I'm Swiss, but I live in Germany. You can fill it out and it will only show you jobs that you could actually work for, that actually hire for you, which is, again, it's not a super difficult thing. It wasn't a super difficult thing to build, but this is the problem that we kept hearing. Right? I have all these amazing people from all over the world in my Twitter DMs, in my LinkedIn messages that are like, "Can you please help me find a job?" Every job I apply to is like, "Oh, US only, this on," and we're like, "Well, it's about time that we solve this problem." And so that is explicitly what we done. Again, it's a step one in the journey. We're gonna release a lot more cool shit, but we figured, well, if you own the domain remote.com, you don't have any remote jobs other than our own, which is why we get 10,000 applications a month. We better deliver this service, and so that's what we done. At the time that people will be hearing this, we've just launched it, so it's probably going to be half broken, and we'll be working hard to fix all the issues and bugs and things we overlooked when we were designing it. But we've been pretty thoughtful about the way we were going to build this, and where we want to get to is that it's actually the biggest place to find remote work. Um, uh, and just work in general, right? So even if you're a company that has only offices, you can still post jobs there, although we will be very it will show it, right? So it will say fully remote, and for companies that are office based, it will say all in office, right? Expected to be in office in a particular location. Because there's people that want that work, and we want to accommodate for that as well. And it will be regardless of whether you are looking for a full-time job, or rather if you are a freelancer. Actually, what we're launching at the same time is the ability as a freelancer to sign up and like start invoicing clients, so you can find work there as well. And so yeah, that's it. That's we're pretty excited about it. It's called Remote Jobs. Just again, I think
Really
pretty
good for
name.
SEO.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Could you elaborate just a little bit on that last point about the ability for freelancers to sign up and start invoicing people immediately? How does that connect and differentiate?
Yeah, so for the longest period of time, we had this contractor management product inside of Remote, and it's quite it's very popular. We have a lot of employers that just pay out their contractors, and nowadays it's really good. But what we never did is we never really opened up the gates for freelancers to sign up themselves and start invoicing their customers directly there. And it's a waste because we have these amazing payment rails. You can get paid really quickly. And the nice thing about our platform is you can actually fully automate it. So you don't have to ever think about it. And so now we made it finally possible. Finally, because I've been wanting to do this for years, we finally made it possible for freelancers to sign up themselves, start invoicing their clients. And the nice thing is because you have remote jobs, you can find work there directly. And so again, employers looking for freelancers or having work available can post a job there and say, oh, you can do this work. This is how much you're going to get paid. Oh yeah, I didn't mention this. We also added this whole suite of suite. It's like a single way to indicate how much you're going to get paid, but we made it so that it actually works for everybody involved. So if you have a yearly salary, you can indicate that. Also, you can indicate it in the currency in which you're going to be paying that. And then we made it so that we have tools that can convert it to local currency, so that if you search by your local currency, it is not conflating the fact that you have a high inflation currency. Essentially, it gives you an actual number of how much you're going to get paid. And then in the future, what we're going to do is we're going to make it possible so that you also see, for example, what you're going to earn net. So if you are if you're employed, right, you have employment agreement, you pay income tax the moment you receive your salary, your paycheck, and so we can actually show you whether you're going to pay net. You, a person living in the Netherlands, for example, where you're going to pay 54% after tax.
This is like the whole conversation, the things that are coming to my mind as you're saying this is like, this is that evolution of this space that we're talking about, like making all of this all sounds like it should be easy. And the fact is that like, it hasn't been like there's so many friction points there throughout the process for all the different entities involved, and just like smoothing those out a little bit and leveling that playing field is so important and like extremely exciting.
We're super excited about it. The complexity is not because nobody put effort in it. The complexity exists because there's many countries and there's many people, and you can't really avoid it altogether. We had a version of remote where we abstracted away all complexities, and so all countries were the same, right? It was just they had a different name, but the whole process was the same. And what we learned was that that was not welcomed. Some people, very small startups that like didn't give a shit at first, but most companies actually want to understand to some degree, if I'm going to hire somebody in country A or country B, what are the differences like? What do I have to think about? And not just cost, but also, do they have to treat these people different? Should I have different expectations around, for example, performance management, right? Which is always a sticky item. Are there many protections for employees? And so we also had to learn that not all complexity you want to hide, and some of it you actually want to surface. And finding the balance is really, really hard. And it was hard for employers, and yeah, it's going to be challenging for individuals now as well, right? Because we're going to give you all the tools to find the perfect remote job, and then you're going to find that you and I don't know 50,000 other people want that job as well. And so we don't have an explicit plan yet how to solve for that, but there's probably something in the future that we'll have to build that also prevents you from, getting overloaded with applicants as an employer, or as individual helps you actually find jobs that not only suit your requirements, but also that you actually have a good shot at getting. Which I think is yet another like an additional dimension of complexity, right? Because there's an imbalance on the marketplace of remote labor.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's like we're talking a lot about the core of what you guys do, and what I think is really awesome is that you've also expanded into some other areas to like just help with those little friction points. So like for example, I used you guys when we had someone that really needed to get out of their country, and we needed, like, we had them employed in a certain way. Like this is the thing, like you don't think about this when you're setting up a company early on, but like you have people in 100 different countries around the world, and like what's the equivalent of a entrepreneur, a LLC, or a S corp, or whatever it may be in the US versus that version in 10 other countries, right? And so we had this person employed under a certain way, contract in place in their country that worked really well for there, but they needed to get out of that country. We wanted to help move them. We have like a perk in place to help get people to other places if it's like needed. And so we enacted that, but then we ran into like all these legal troubles and visa issues, and the list goes on. And like I mean, had one point of contact at Remote that helped walk me through the whole thing, solved the problem, got the person moved, kept them employed, and their life is like so much better for it. So these are the things we're talking about. I mean, that's just
I didn't
one,
know that,
one
so that's
example.
great. It's great to hear that it also didn't surface to me. But I don't know. Yeah, you tell this story, and I'm like, oh, I'm glad that it went well. But I have like these scars from dealing with visa and mobility issues, which are mostly out of our control. Right? Like that to me, it's one of my great frustrations. I don't want to turn this conversation to a negative rant, but like my great frustration about doing all of this is just facing like bureaucracy and like making people's life unnecessarily difficult, because again, they are born in the wrong place, or they have the wrong identity, right? The wrong identity, the wrong citizenship, right? This this so difficult. It's very rewarding when it goes well, luckily, and like we work extremely hard for it. And but it is also very frustrating when it doesn't work. And when things are out of our control, which is with visa and immigration, you can only do so much. 95% is out of our control.
Yeah, as someone who's been living out of their home country for many years, and in a handful of different countries had gone through the visa thing, I'm so over it, and just like excited about like any innovation in that space, because it's terribly bureaucratic and really rough to deal with. So yeah, anything that's smoothing that out for people is I'm very much so in favor of. Do you personally, like, when you say that, are you talking about experiences of your customers, or do you have like a personal connection to like global mobility challenges?
I mean, a very simple ones for myself. So I've lived between the Netherlands and Portugal for many years. My wife's Portuguese, so we lived many years in both places. And luckily, because we're both EU residents, it's incredibly easy. So we don't have to worry about work permits as such. But like, you would think that things like taxes are solved within the EU, and they're completely not. It's a giant mess. And to this day, I'm doing taxes from years back when I was still living in Portugal, and like, it's genuinely extremely painful and complex. And I remember the first time that I moved to Portugal, I got double taxed, because if you don't, move from December 31st to January 1st, then tax authorities are like, they both want to claim on part of your income. And at the time, I didn't have any money. I was earning €700 a month as a scientist, so I basically had no money. And I remember I got double taxed, and tax authority sends you a letter that says you have to pay this much. Like, oh my god, okay, I'm gonna pay it, and then I'll work on trying to get it back because I'm getting double taxed. And I've never got it back. And at the time, it was incredibly painful. Um, and I know like that's not a big worry, like some money issues. I didn't have any money, but I didn't have any dependents either, so it was easy at the time. But yeah, the kind of stuff that we face daily at remote, related to mobility, and indeed sometimes you have to get people out of countries, right? Unfortunately, we are now in most of the world. It just happens every day that we have to get somebody out of a country. There's conflicts happening all the time everywhere. It's just incredibly stressful and awful. But we do what we can, and then sometimes it feels satisfying to know that we make somewhat of a difference there, right? I think the best stories that I've heard were people that were able to continue to sustain themselves after they fled a country, for example. Those are the best stories I've heard. People that normally would have gone into refugee camps, or otherwise sometimes were living in refugee camps, but because they had access to remote work, and we were able to identify them as talented people, for example, to the local government. They were able to not just like live on an allowance that they got from their host country, but they were also actually able to earn great money and like sort of buy their way out of the refugee camps, or like set up like a proper life for themselves in the country that provided them refugee. And so those are the best stories that I've heard. And I think that when that happens, I'm very proud that we can make somewhat of an impact in it. But yeah.
I'm glad those things get elevated to you at times, because that is, I mean, that's the reality. And yeah, it's exciting when you see those things on the ground level. And I know I love to showcase those when when someone comes at me saying this remote work thing is just all about you young elitists, that have the tech jobs. And well, I mean, I see it impacting a lot of people in a positive way. So anyway, that's I'm
Yeah,
glad.
you
I'm
know
glad.
what? I think the way to think about this is that we, re- and again, remote work still facilitates only particular types of jobs, but those particular types of job is the category known as knowledge workers, right? And that category is large and increasing, right? And so there are a billion knowledge workers on the planet, and that number will increase over time, especially through automation, robotization, etc. And so more and more people are becoming knowledge workers in countries like the Netherlands, where majority of people are already knowledge workers. All those people this applies to, and so that is not just elitist tech workers. There are also elitist tech workers, but many of those elitist tech workers, they choose to like live their lives in expensive places as well, right? And so no, it is extremely big, and the potential impact of like making this easier, uh, it's really large and it's
Yeah.
meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing stories like you. You mentioned you're in the middle of nowhere in Holland somewhere, and there's guys like Chris Hurd who are in the middle of nowhere in Scotland. My CEO is from a Bosnian refugee that built a company completely remotely from the ground up. So like that you don't like. I think the very cool thing that I hear, the red thread that connects a lot of you that have built companies like this, is like you didn't have to transplant the life that you really wanted to live, whether for you that would have been in Portugal or in the Netherlands, and like move to Silicon Valley to build a successful tech company. And that's extrapolated out across a lot of industries and a lot of companies. So yeah, I mean, I mean, from a family dynamics, like, you guys are living in Holland now. I assume that's by choice, but you could be back in Portugal, and your kids do you guys raise them bilingual?
Yeah, so we moved to the Netherlands because this is an excellent place to raise kids. You don't need to use the car. You can cycle anywhere. I can talk about that later for 4 hours about just bicycles and like great infrastructure. And yeah,
I will
we
gladly
raised the
nerd out on that
kids.
with you.
We raised the kids. I mean, I speak Dutch with my kids. My wife speaks Portuguese, and my wife and I speak English with each other. And so they get the three language. Now my son is 3, so he's doing a little speaking. But my daughter is fluent in Dutch and Portuguese, and she understands all the English to the point where we can't have like a secret conversation in front of her anymore because she doesn't like hear it and then catches on. No, like she calmly interjects, right? So you just like she just knows, she understands, and of course because it's English, she also hears it on YouTube and on her iPad and whatnot. So it is already a um, so yeah, no, it's incredibly fortunate. And yeah, I really love our life here. We live, as I said, we live in the middle of nowhere. It's like a little village with schools and playgrounds. There's not much. It's not very exciting, but it's incredibly great place to live. And yeah, people here in the Netherlands. They always laugh a little bit when I tell them I live here. They're like, why don't you live like? I often say that I live in Amsterdam, but I live out of out of Amsterdam. And they are like, why do you live there? I'm like, because it's great. It's a great place to live. It's like Amsterdam is great too. And it's not too far from here, but like here, it's very calm and there's no tourists here. It's a lot easier life than in Amsterdam, which is already pretty great. So yeah, I love it, and that's one of the things that our way of working and way of living makes possible, so that you can make these kind of choices. That in this case, we're close to my parents, that can take care of the kids, and yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, it's about quality of life and like having agency to choose, and someone else isn't choosing for you where you have to live if you want to have a successful company. So
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. You're talking to someone who absolutely loves the Netherlands. Like, I think it's one of those places where I feel like I probably will have to spend some time like living for a while. It just, for some reason, I'm just kind of like called to it. The transition for me will happen probably at some point. I've looked into it, and with the visa I have now, it is an option. So maybe I'll be
That's good.
your neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, it would come after the winter. It's like the days are pretty wet and cold nowadays, but like if you come here from April, May on, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's a very special country. I really love living here. The quality of life is just absurdly high, and many people often talk to me, but the taxes are so high and whatnot. But I'm like, yeah, but that's like sort of the price of admission, having high taxes, and then I get to enjoy this country, which is incredibly easy to get around, which has insanely great facilities. This is really crazy thing about the Netherlands. So if, especially having lived in Portugal, I see the contracts. If you need anything here, you can go to the name of that object.nl, which is our country TLD, and then there will be a website there. So like if you want a flashlight, you can go to the Dutch website for a flashlight.nl, or probably the English word as well, and there will be a web shop that will deliver the same day to your house that specific item. You can choose from anything. It's this really weird thing that's crazy useful. So we have Amazon, and we have an Amazon competitor, which is also great. But like that's what, like one of those little things that's so useful about the Netherlands compared to other European countries that I've visited for longer periods of time. And besides, it's an incredible country. You can get around so easily. I know many people that don't have a car, and you don't really need one in the Netherlands. Like you can get around on a bicycle and the train just fine, and usually it's faster. So if I take my car to Amsterdam, it's about half an hour, but then I have to stress about where to park, and like which is a pain in the ass there. If I go by train, I am there in 20 minutes. I have a bicycle permanently stored at the station of Amsterdam. I can get around the city really easily. It's amazing. I love it.
It's incredible. I mean, I think we had an episode earlier this season where we talked about like some of the mechanics of actually moving to the Netherlands. If you're like someone from outside the EU and you want to make the Netherlands your home, so just kind of talking through like how you could actually do that. And she was a foreigner. The person that we were talking, like she wasn't from the Netherlands originally, but now she helps people. She went through the process herself and was like, I want to provide this service to people because it's painful, as we alluded to earlier. Anyway, her whole thing that she kept saying throughout the conversation was like, yeah, the Netherlands just works. Like everything just works. And it's like so convenient. And it's like from the, the public transport and infrastructure to just even like the bureaucracy. She's like, compared to moving to other countries, like this is very smooth and very digital. And so anyway, I think there's a lot to be enjoyed there. You and I have both lived on the Iberian Peninsula. I've been living in Spain for the last for 5 of the last 6 years, and you lived in Portugal. And I think that's the trade-off you make. Like you get the wet, like, you're talking about the weather in the Netherlands. I got used to living in Spain and Valencia where like I didn't even check the weather because I knew exactly what it was. Like it was going to be sunny.
Yeah, it's the best. It's amazing. Yeah,
it's amazing. And you get really used to that and kind of spoiled by it, but you also get used to like things not working quite as well. And that's a reality that a lot of expats come to find out, but pros and cons with different places.
for sure. No, I lived for many years in Portugal, in part because I love to live there, and it's still a very large part of my life. But living in the Netherlands, I live here because living here with kids is like, I think, one of the best things you can do for the kids and even for yourself. I do think that if my wife and I didn't have kids, or if they get older, we might live somewhere else. We might live. I think we both like cities. We might actually live in New York or Madrid or I don't know. But with kids, this place is just amazing. And I know because we had kids in Portugal, so that they were both born there. So I have like a really strong comparison point. And yeah, honestly, it's no comparison. That's honestly it.
I'm glad you guys got what you're looking for, and again, that's what I think it's all about, is like just people having the flexibility to choose what's right for them, and location is a huge part of that. Yeah. It's more vital for some than others, but like it can be, it's one of those major building blocks of life. So thank you guys for facilitating that, and also like sharing all that you do. You're one of the companies that builds in public. I think that starts with you and it trickles down throughout the organization. So you're sharing best practices, making your handbook public. Now building a job board that's going to facilitate people actually getting remote work. You're touching all aspects of the ecosystem, and so those of us from the outside looking in definitely appreciate it. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. I could ask you a million more questions, but I know you got to get back to real work. So
I actually have to go get on my cargo bike and pick up my kids from school. That's the reality. It's like here every day at 5 p.m. I go and I pick them up at after school care and daycare. But that's the reality. I'm going to get on my cargo bike, and depending on the weather, I might have to pull on my rain jacket. that's the downside of living here.
Oh man, well, you'll be missing those warm Portuguese sunny days if that's the case. But good to know you got the kids to look forward to. And this was great, Job. Thank you for sharing. We'll place all the links to the show note, or all the links that we mentioned in the show notes. Is there anywhere else we should add while people are listening, where they should connect with you? Find more about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, remote.com/jobs for job board, remote.com/handbook for a handbook. And you can follow me on Twitter. I retweet all those things. So
you're also a bit active on LinkedIn more these days, I think, too. Correct?
Yeah, I post all my bad takes on LinkedIn. So yeah, no, you can follow me there if you want to. If you want to hear my strong statements without any subtleties.
Yeah. Nice. Well, personally, I enjoy it. So keep doing that. And yeah, thanks a lot. Hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.